Welcome to a brand new episode of Tech Your Business. I'm Peter Banigo, and today I'm joined by Tim. Tim is the author of a book called Framed, which is a villain's perspective on social media. So you wonder why he named the book that. That's because he built an Instagram bot. I'm sure you've probably heard of those bots and all that, what they do on social media and co. So he understands the workings of social media, generating revenue for businesses through social media and things like that. And I know a lot of businesses who go on social media don't really get any returns from it. So we'll be exploring that, how to make social media work for you, the nuances, the things that work, things that don't work, and let me not talk too much. Welcome to the show, team.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So, before we go fully into the episode, can you tell us about your journey from creating bot software I mentioned not long ago to writing the book you just launched a couple of months ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, One thing that is certainly true is that if I was still running the business, I probably wouldn't have written the book. Uh, there's a lot that there's a lot that goes into something like this, but also there's a fear that by writing about it or by gaining more attention to it, you could enforce, you could face further enforcement actions from the platforms themselves, or you could find new competitors say, well, if that guy's making so much money, we can do it too. So for me, the process was in 2017, being fresh out of college and being very, very suspicious and distrusting of the idea of that this could even work, to then through 2019 having built a thriving business where we had thousands of customers, and the subscription revenue was significant at that point. It was actually more than my full time job. What we then kind of uncovered going into 2020 and late 2019 was that the social media platforms, specifically Instagram, were taking a lot of action against providers like mine, and it was much more difficult to run the business. So even by 2020, there were only a few left. By 2021 and 2022, our service was only intermittently available. By 2022, it was very clear that things were headed towards zero, that towards no providers being left. And during that time, I prepared material to publish either on my blog or maybe in like a serial fashion. I eventually arrived at a book because I thought there was enough material there beyond my narrative. So I began in earnest at some point in 2022. I had one diversion where I actually worked at a social media startup, and that all resulted in most of the material being written by late 2024 and finally getting it out earlier this year.
Okay, so now I think some people might be wondering Instagram bot, what's a bot? So so they don't get lost. Can you just explain what an Instagram bot is, what it does, and why the social media platforms are so much against them?
Sure. When we think about social media bots, it could be doing anything in that a bot could automate any aspect of human interaction. So you might have heard, oh, there's an auto liker bot, there's an auto DMing bot. Any action that a user could take could reasonably be automated. In my era, there were two types of bots. One was, I would say, the botnet bot, which is a type of program that would log into fake accounts to be used to get people massive amounts of fake likes. So if you've ever seen an account with a suspiciously high amount of followers, or you've ever seen one of these services that sells you 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 likes, those bots were being used to create fake accounts and then to kind of harness those fake accounts toward customers. So saying, hey, now you have 100,000 followers, but they're all fake. That was the first type, and that was something I never dealt directly in. The second type, which we really saw proliferate into 2017, was the follow unfollow bot. So this was not a fake account. It was an account like yours or mine, in which someone would log in part time using an automation program. So it would log into your account, it would look like you, and it would take actions, and people would think, okay, this is Tim or this is Peter. And it would be used to uh, kind of execute high reciprocity actions against other accounts. So it would say, let's leave positive comments on an account that I think will result in people seeing my posts. let's leave a like, let's give somebody a follow, and let's hope that about 10% of those actions are given back to me. So these bots, the follow on follow bots, exploited this human tendency to look at whoever is interacting with you, especially on the micro level.
Interesting. I think I remember when the follow and follow process was popular because they always said you should follow a lot of people in your niche, and then they follow you. Some of them follow you back,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So now, one thing business owners have, one grouse they have against social media is it keeps changing so much. And a lot of times people feel, okay, I understand social media, or I feel it works this way. So when you look at business owners generally, what's one assumption you've seen a lot of them have about how social media works? But for you, who has dealt with it from the inside, you know it's false, it's not true.
A lot of it comes down to these marks of digital popularity. What we saw, especially before blue check marks became something anyone could buy, was that pretty much every business, and especially those in the entertainment business, everyone was under the assumption that you needed a blue check mark or you needed some mark of importance to show your audience that you were authentic or popular or like towards the top of your profession. And I think that was the biggest sham of all time, especially when you think about the amounts of money that were being exchanged for this to happen. Really, a blue check mark just means I am the real one because I've done ID verification. And that's how it started back in 2009 on Twitter. A lot of people then saw the most popular people with these blue check marks and thought, okay, well, I need one too. But the truth is that most entertainers and most businesses, most personalities, there isn't a real risk of impersonation. So people paid thousands of dollars to boost their online presence with basically fake news articles and things of that nature to fool the people at Meta who were making the decisions behind giving the blue check marks. Eventually, Meta, as well as X and other platforms, they just said, this is crazy. Let's just start charging for it overall. And so I would say that that was the biggest sham, something that people wasted a ton of money on and where it had no bearing on who they were, what they were doing. The second thing is just more generally follower count. A lot of businesses think that if you can get a follower count into the thousands, let's say, that that's going to make a meaningful impact on your business. I think many business owners have been disappointed to learn that that's not really how virtual followings work. They can be potential customers, but the conversion rates for most brands, it's actually awful.
Okay, so you mentioned two things. I remember the time when there used to actually be agencies who would work on getting blue check marks for people, and like you said, thousands of dollars and a very long process, and then you have just that small thing by your name. And like you said, it doesn't really make any impact, any ROI on the business. You mentioned the two things, the blue check mark and the follow account, which is something a lot of people are big on, and I'm sure why a lot of people wanted those bots, so they have a lot of followers. So you mentioned those things people feel work but don't. So what would you say actually works for social media, for businesses especially?
This is a really tough space because most advice can't be generalized for any business owner. A lot of agencies, and even when I was running a business toward, even some of it was B2B, the point is that everybody's trying to sell something, but a lot of times what a business is imagining as far as business success goes, there might not be a playbook for getting there. And in my book, I analyze this and say, it can't be that every single customer we had at Shark Social, which is what I codenamed my company, it can't possibly be that every one of these customers had a business that was viable at all. So really what the recommendation I make is actually borrowed from like video game terminology, which is the concept of get good, which is this thing that people in video games say to each other. It really is a term to show that you're very new to this and you need to like put more work in to get better without giving specific instructions. So it's kind of said as this, kind of like derogatory remark, like, oh, get good, like you're bad at the game. I would give that advice to most business owners, which is that unless you are a social media business, social media might not even be the best place for you, and it might not even contain that end state that you're looking for as far as business success, commercial success. So a lot of my advice is that rather than focusing on follower count and like this posting schedule and hiring people to design all this content, a lot of it can be avoided if a business owner focuses on the craft, meaning whatever they say is their business or that they're good at, it's probably much more useful to focus on the craft. So if you're a musician, rather than promoting your music for 3 hours every day, maybe you should actually practice playing your instrument. And I think we can take that example and extrapolate it even to much more complicated businesses as well.
I think I like that advice because a lot of the time with marketing, I've had this analogy I usually make that a lot of businesses are good at marketing and a lot of businesses are good at what they do. A lot of times you see the businesses good at marketing, you go to them and then a lot of the time you end up having a bad experience, and your advice really gets rid of that because if you're good at what you do, you deal with maybe one or two people and they are wowed by what you do. They end up referring you, spreading your name. You don't have those bad reviews, and that grows your business too. So I think I agree with that part of what you said. So there's one thing businesses um, experience because, for instance, especially of recent on the older social media platforms, a lot of businesses try to make these social media posts and all that, and a lot of times they don't get any reach, they don't get any interactions or anything. And from looking at your profile, I know you worked on feed algorithms, on recommendation systems. So can you just give maybe an idea of how these systems decide what gets shown and what gets buried on the timelines?
That's really important. And I think cracking that code is crucial. Whether you're a high schooler on social media for the first time, whether you're somebody managing the account for a business that has millions of followers, or someone like you or me who's in between, regardless of your experience on the internet, understanding these algorithms in search and in the feed is crucial. However, they're so technically complicated that most people don't have a way to do it. So you end up Googling how to beat the algorithm or like how to go viral. And it means that there's a lot of people then who engage in disruptive behaviors or just do the wrong thing or give money to people they can't trust because they think those people are feigning some expertise. I would like to think I have some level of authentic expertise in that I did build these feeds at a smaller social media startup. And what I cover in my book is that a long time ago, all the feeds were chronological. So you were guaranteed that all of your followers, friends, whatever, what have you, would see your post. However, the feed might have been a lot less interesting because if you had one friend who posted 10 times a day, every one of their 10 posts would end up in the feed. We can all agree that that's probably not ideal, that you want to condense that one user. And then if you have a friend who only posts once per month, naturally you probably want to give a little boost to them rather than showing it in a chronological feed. So this concept was taken by Facebook and others when Facebook created the news feed, which actually happened very early in the game. But I remember at the time people rebelled against it and they said, hey, this is awful, like my posts aren't getting shown, things are being hidden. What these new age algorithmic feeds provided was more space for advertising. So in previous feeds, you just had content, 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 and it was usually one or two other types of content. Looking at Facebook, which is still probably the best example, now you get all types of content in your feed. You get suggested group posts, you get your existing group posts, you get other aspects of your friend activity. But I find, even though I have 1,500 friends, the majority of my content today is content from groups and ads. So understanding these algorithms is really important because what it really is of course increasing user stickiness. We're saying yes, these are still better than the chronological feeds, this is still very better than version 1, but also every 3 or 4 posts on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever, is an advertisement. And these advertisements are embedded in a way that it takes more than a split second to realize that an ad is an ad in some
Yeah.
cases. And that's what I experienced at the startup. We were pre-revenue, so we were just trying to get the users before we actually, added advertisers to the platform. But I did a ton of experimentation as far as like what will, what will incur the most like user stickiness, like what will make the user stay on our app for as long as possible and hopefully click. And there's tons that happens there to kind of manipulate and provide a more entertaining product, which eventually gives way to, it's on the spectrum of addiction. Like what is a very entertaining product versus a very addicting one? I think in the web 2, in this like late stage web 2.0, we found that they're, often one and the same.
Yeah, and I think most of these platforms, so they just look for new ways to be more addictive with the notifications, the endless scrolls, and everything,
Yeah.
and new features. So there's this term I saw when I was researching your book. I said I was not going to check it out. I was going to ask you. So it's you mentioned the dead internet theory. So, can you explain what this term means and if it's something that should concern business owners, especially those who are trying to grow or trying to market their craft on social media?
This is a really important term. And even since I published the book, over a month ago, there have been some very, very detailed discussions and articles on the internet of others who are taking this seriously for the first time. So, thinking about the origins of the dead internet theory, it was really this like fringe conspiracy theory where people are saying, what if nothing on the internet is human or genuine? Like, what if every single piece of content, every persona, what if everything was fake? And this goes through different content mediums. So, some things like text are much easier to fake even 5 years ago. Now, it's almost impossible to discern that certain text is actually written by a human versus a computer. And you take this up through different types of content. Like, okay, what about photos? What about videos? And then what about live videos, especially? So, of course, we know that AI's capabilities are growing, but it's not perfect. Like, you would know the difference. But what happened between maybe 5 years ago or earlier when the theory was proposed and like last year or 2 years ago is that huge swaths of the internet now are being manipulated in ways that are fully automated. So originally people were saying, hey, it's dead or like it's less human. And this is a part of a huge propaganda campaign, potentially by the US government to control the flow of information, to manipulate what people think and how they act. And what we've seen recently, the US elections notwithstanding, is that there's a lot of change happening here, and different groups are taking interests in the platforms as vectors for manipulation. So when I think about the dead internet theory, of course, I don't log onto the internet and think this is all fake, but I'm increasingly suspicious. And I think that the issue is not for people like me or you, it's when it's somebody's first day on the internet. What do they encounter and how do they know? So you and I have been doing this for a while. We're we're pretty experienced. You get other people just using it for the first time, or people who might be elderly, people who might be very young, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to differentiate real versus fake. So the idea is that this brings us closer to this technological singularity where if the incentives are there and if the cost is low enough, then yes, fake personas and bots on the internet could greatly outnumber humans to the point that human voices are essentially zero.
Yeah, and I think with the way AI is growing, it's getting worse because for the past few weeks, I've seen a couple of posts of people who put out jobs, especially for remote positions, and then they have these deep fake people using
Right.
other people's IDs and creating, even coming on video calls, and they look so real, sound so real, but they're all fake, and it's crazy because I think in those days, a fake profile was just basically someone stealing a name and a photo. They would never come on a video call, but it just gets
Mhm.
worse and worse and worse as it goes on. as time goes on. So I think one other thing I would like to discuss is a lot of businesses, because they don't have the time, especially to, or the experience to manage these social media platforms. A lot of them hire social media marketing agencies to do this for them. But when I talk to a lot of businesses, or when I read about a lot of businesses, I see a lot of businesses don't have really good experiences, because a lot of them say these social media agencies inflate their results and things like that. And when you mentioned the bots too, I know back in the days, a lot of them would usually say they're managing an account and they just buy a lot of fake likes or a lot of
Sure,
fake
sure.
followers for them. So what's your thoughts on this? What's your take on what I just mentioned?
This is generally true and matches my experience as well, in that even in the early 2010s, people realized that they could start their own social media agencies. And in the US, you had influencers like Ty Lopez, who was like the Lamborghini in my garage guy. One of the first courses that he sold to the mass market was how to start your own social media agency. And the idea was that even though this is a web based business, every small town probably has room for one social media slash website hosting type business. I think today that's even true, even though it's become much easier for a regular person to just drag and drop a website. But that's been going on for so long, and you have to think that a lot of it is just sales paired with a product that is largely, not useful today. Social media management is such a tough business because if you're putting out content, the manager who might be working on 10 different businesses won't be a subject matter expert to begin with. So even if you're thinking, okay, we want to cultivate some personality here, we want our page to be commenting on other pages, I wouldn't necessarily trust an 18-year-old or 19-year-old like college intern to be growing my page that way. And when I've worked with some social media management agencies that were kind of, adjacent to what I was doing at Shark Social, we found the same thing. We would go to job fairs, and tons of people would want to work for us, even at very, very low rates. And then when we went to interview them, we would realize most of them couldn't even write. Most of them really couldn't think that critically. Most of them didn't have basic design skills. So the unfortunate thing, which relates to what you've experienced, is that people conflate spending all day on social media with being some type of social media expert. That couldn't be farther from the truth. So if I'm a business owner, there's a few things that I would like as far as getting a regular cadence of posts and ensuring that like my website gets a decent amount of search traffic. But I'm highly suspicious of anything expensive or anything that's promising the end goal. A lot of the frustrations that these clients probably feel is that they're expecting the agency will take them all the way to the finish line with sales conversions, when in actuality, if those agencies could do it, they would just be starting their own businesses as well. They would be starting their own niche businesses as well. That's
Yeah.
really not how it works. And I think internet marketing is really frustrating in that way.
Because I took something from that. When you hire a social media agency, you should be looking at them doing a set of things, a set of inputs consistently, not at them getting maybe sales conversions or results for you. But a lot of these agencies, like you mentioned, a lot of them are really good at sales. And when they come to you, they come with a lot of flashy, convincing case studies and a lot of promises and so on. So, for a business owner who has been approached by maybe an agency like that, what red flags should they look out for? And maybe considering the case studies, what questions can they ask to verify that these are real, that those results are replicable for them?
The red flag will almost always be guaranteed follower growth or guaranteed impressions. That's the biggest red flag. And I would also say it's disingenuous because it's not necessarily correlated with sales to begin with. So for someone to say, hey, you'll get 1,000 followers per month, okay, what is that really doing for me? In today's world, the truth is not much. So that's one of the red flags to look out for. I also think in the SEO space, so with search engine optimization, there's a lot that goes on there that is not necessarily healthy. So there's this concept of black hat marketing, which I covered in the book, which is to say that there are some things that work temporarily, but in the long run, ultimately end up working against a business owner. The most difficult thing when assessing someone who might be approaching business owner selling services is that what they're doing might have been learned and passed on in a chain from the originator, someone who discovered it or someone who created the practice, all the way through one business owner, through an agency, through a business owner, through someone who copied it. So in a lot of cases, the expertise that seems to be there is actually a game of telephone, where it's like this
Mm.
agency owner needs to call this person who needs to call this person to understand what's going on. And it's just so easy for an agency owner to fool a business owner in these cases.
Okay, so now I think going back to the technical parts, there's a you mentioned something called shadow bans, because I mentioned earlier that a lot of businesses make posts and co and they don't really get any interaction, and a lot of them tie this to shadow bans, which you mentioned in your book. So these shadow bans, are they real, and how do they impact businesses trying to grow organically on social media?
It is closely related to the earlier question about what's going on in the feed and why is it important to understand. And the truth is that the feed has been changed in a way that every post you make won't be seen by your full audience. And then additionally, there are requirements that your post, it has to hit certain metrics in order to be shown to an even wider audience. So to go viral, to show up on the search page or the hashtag page and so on. By the same token, if those systems exist, then there must also exist a system for suppression. So rather than giving everyone a fair shot, it's quite easy for one of these feeds or one of these platforms to look at an account that may be disruptive or might lightly violate terms of service and say, rather than giving this person an outright ban, let's silence them. And that's what shadow banning is. So
Hmm.
rather like your posts right now, they might only be seen by 100 people because that's how these algorithms kind of force us to buy ads. Maybe it's only shown to 100 out of your 10,000 followers. With a shadow ban, or what people suspect a shadow ban is, it might be shown to 0 followers, and it might not ever be shown in search. It might not even appear on your profile page. It's frustrating, and it's also very hard to detect. If you are banned, you'll get a message saying you're banned, you can't browse in the app, whatever. But a shadow ban, you can still do all of the read only activities. You can still browse like a normal user, and you may be able to hand out likes, leave comments, make posts, but in actuality, they aren't shown to anybody. So it's like you exist in this like completely isolated state on the social media site. And a shadow ban is somewhere between these two levels, where one is that it's absolutely not shown to anybody, and it's because the platform has decided you're someone who is disruptive. And the other one is like slightly less serious, where it's like rather than being shown to 100 people, maybe it's shown to 2 people, and as a result, it seems like you're shadow banned. So I address this in my book because it's so funny how shadow banning has evolved over the
Hmm.
years. It was kind of this rumor that people were saying like on Twitter a long time ago. Before Twitter, you had people on web forums saying, "Oh, well, the moderators shadow banned me because whatever." And you can kind of see this building tension between uh, internet users and platform owners, and especially as the internet has become more of a place where people are expressing controversial opinions, where a lot of people will claim, "Oh, well, people don't see my stuff because I'm shadow banned," both as a fact of life and as a cop out. So it's easy to say, "Oh, nobody's going to see this podcast because I'm shadow banned," but in actuality, that's not always the case. It's a very complicated subject. To answer your question, it is true, and it absolutely does happen. Meta has acknowledged shadow banning in a blog post, I think called like shadow banning or info about shadow banning, but within the post, they never completely admit to it. So it's still something of like this this poorly kept secret.
So, so since they've not really admitted to it, that means there is not really a way around it or a way to avoid it, apart from, like you said, not being disruptive to the platform.
Yeah, and we simply don't know why. In some cases, it could be manually curated. So someone who's a moderator at Meta could look at a profile and say, okay, we're going to shadow ban, even as far as we're going to reduce the reach. In the same way, they could also shadow boost someone. So if they decide, hey, we like what this person's saying, they're a pillar of the platform, everything they say is correct, they could also adjust these values such that that person is shown to a very wide audience immediately. So you have to think if they can shadow ban someone, they can also shadow boost someone to give someone a naturally large audience despite not paying for ads. And to detect these things, it's basically impossible. That's what makes it so difficult. If you're banned, you could check if you're banned. If you're shadow banned, well, it's really, really tough. You could post and then you could create a different account and you could log in anonymously and you could check the account. So there are services called like shadow ban checkers, but they only check that one version, which is that is the post visible at all. There's virtually no way to check if your initial audience is reduced. The only way to do it would be outrageously expensive to set up these controlled experiments.
Interesting. So, look, from your book, Framed, and for our audience, which are business owners, we've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about shadow bans, we've talked about the algorithm, we've talked about social media agencies, and a couple of other things around social media. So, from looking at your book Framed and looking at our audience of small business owners, what's something in your book that you believe would be beneficial, very beneficial to this audience that we haven't discussed?
The book covers a lot of ground from the origin of the internet until the present day. And part of why I wrote this book is not to be a guidebook, is to not be a self help book, to not be one of those things you pick up with a certain goal in mind. But knowing that so much of my audience is comprised of business owners, small businesses, and also influencers, I think it's really important to understand how we got to today. And so many people are on the internet. They're really, really grinding, trying to build these online personas just to get banned or just to find that the next week, you're on Twitter and then it becomes X and then you have Blue Sky. There's always going to be another platform. And what people are realizing more and more today is that it's very, very hard to have control and ownership on these platforms as a business owner. And what I recommend, really as an outgrowth of the book, not necessarily in the book because it's not like the book doesn't really have step by step processes for anything, but the value of starting a mailing list, as old of a concept, as like antiquated of a concept as that sounds in the digital age, that's probably the biggest takeaway is that the business owner, the best way to get the message out there, the best way to actually convert is to not just focus on Twitter, to not focus on Facebook, to not focus on Snapchat. I've run ads personally on every platform imaginable, but what it all comes back to is consolidating the audience in one place where I own it. So if you get banned from one of these platforms, or even if you get hacked, you might not ever be able to recreate that audience somewhere else. At least when you have a mailing list, you have a direct way to communicate with people that is platform agnostic. And that's probably the biggest takeaway for me is that more people are seeing this now. Centralizing everyone somewhere that is not on one of the major platforms where you own nothing is probably the best way forward.
Okay, because I think when we were explaining the concept of shadow banning and business owners not being able to know if they're banned or not, then you talked about the algorithm suppressing and things like that. I'm like, it's a crazy place, and I don't really think anyone would really want to be on such a platform where you don't really have much control or invest so much in such platforms where you don't really have where you don't even really know what's going on. So you mentioned getting off these platforms onto a platform you own, which is like maybe a newsletter or a mailing list. So what would you say is the best way for a business? Maybe they've built a big following on these social media platforms and they want to get people over. Do you have any tips for them to do that?
Incentives work. I've seen everything from giveaways to discount codes to asking nicely. Audiences are becoming more and more aware of the plight of the business, of the content creator. We see this a lot on YouTube now, where there are extremely high production value YouTube creators who suddenly find themselves demonetized, meaning that their content violates some like sliding scale of terms of service at YouTube. YouTube has decided we won't run ads on your videos anymore. You no longer earn revenue. So what these people, started doing is going to sites like Patreon, where you have a little bit more control, and also the terms of service are much more forgiving. More people are aware of this. So for a business owner to get there, I think part of it is just seeing naturally what the rate of conversion is. So having something like a link tree in somebody's Instagram bio, sometimes it comes down to the ordering of links. Like when somebody clicks that, what's your top link? What's your second link, and so on. That affects conversion rates. If you're someone who does more video content, I think it's much easier to splice in, hey, follow me here, follow me there. Whether that is like a Substack or Beehive based newsletter platform, those two things are all the rage now, or someone's own website. So for me, how I um, gained my original fan base, which wasn't gigantic, was that I was on Goodreads, which is it's
Oh,
a book review site that hasn't really had a meaningful update in almost like 15 years. But I was on Goodreads, and I met a lot of people there because they're like, wow, this guy writes tons of book reviews and they're very interesting. Then I started to think, okay, well, I also have a blog. I should probably connect the two things. So then I had Goodreads, I had the blog, and then I had a newsletter on my blog. And what people don't realize is that on social media, the search position, or the ability for people to organically, encounter your content, if it's not recommended by an algorithm, is actually quite poor. But having a blog where all of your posts and all of your content is indexed by a search engine, for certain niches, it's very, very easy to appear on the first page of Google search. And for the last year, while I was writing Framed, I wrote 0 blog posts, and I still got thousands and thousands of views on my blog. And these aren't like amazing blog posts either. So I think um, most people don't want to do that because it involves writing. It is writing intensive and research intensive rather than just snapping a cute picture.
yeah.
But we're going to see more and more people going to that platform where they're realizing they can have more control, and then they can monetize the audience much more effectively.
Okay, so I think those are great tips, and I think business owners should apply those and like you said, move to where they can control. So now your book looks like it's a really important read for anyone who wants to get behind how social media works and learn more about how social media works. So for anyone listening, anyone who is watching and they're interested in getting your book, what's the best way for them to get it?
Framed: A Villain's Perspective on Social Media is now available worldwide, in print, and also on Kindle, on Amazon. So the best way to buy Framed is to check it out on Amazon, where I'm basically offering the book at cost. So in US dollars, it's $199 for the ebook, and in print it's about 15. Considering this is a 436 page book, this is the absolute lowest I can price it. So my perspective here is not one of someone who's selling a guide on how to go viral or how to beat this or beat that. It's someone who deeply appreciates internet history, and kind of the people who made the internet what it is today. Um, to whatever extent I was one of those people, I wanted to tell the story. And so I'm happy to share it with people, essentially at no profit to me.
That's amazing. So 436 pages, it's on Amazon, and the link to purchase the book will be at the show notes for this episode. So thank you, team, for coming on Tech Your Business today and sharing with us on social media.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and for the guests, you can get the book Framed you can connect with Tim. His links will be in the show notes also. And till next week when we're back with a new episode, watch the rest, learn more, and keep taking your business. Bye for now.